Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. Hi loves, it's Aura. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to a brand new video. In this episode of A Mythic History, we will be discussing the top community voted creature, fairies. Next week, we will be heading to Greece to discuss a creature from ancient Greek myth. Place your bets on what we will be covering down below. Fairies, or sometimes called the little people or the hidden people, do not have one particular origin, but are rather a collective of folk beliefs. Saying that, most of the folk tales seem to originate from the Celts and the French, but spread to multiple European countries, and the lore varies widely depending on the region. Many cultures have fairy-like creatures, including the Slavic and Latin peoples, which have fairy origins distilled from Celtic, Welsh, Breton, and French medieval romances and traditions. Fairy lore doesn't stop there, though. China, India, and much of the Arab world have jinns. The Sanskrit have the Gandharva. The Greeks have nymphs, and the Samoans, Arctic peoples, and other indigenous Americans have fairy-like creatures. Before modern literature, the word for fairies in Europe was a catch-all word for many different creatures, including, but not limited to, elves, mermaids, demons, sprites, pixies, brownies, dwarves, gnomes, and even sometimes vampires. Even to this day, the term fairy is used as a group for multiple, slightly different entities. Modern folklorists and mythologists have depicted fairies as the unbaptized and pagan dead, stuck between heaven and earth, the children of Eve, demons, a species of independent humans, an older race of humans, and fallen angels cast down from heaven with Lucifer. In the late Middle Period, the term fairy meant enchanted, land of enchantment, or referred to enchanted creatures. The word also implied the persistence of pre-Christian religious beliefs after the advent of Christianity. So, for much of the medieval ages, fairies were believed to be the hidden remnants of pagan pre-Christianity, enshrined in Victorian romantic literature and nursery stories. It was even thought that in pre-Christian Europe, the fairies were considered lesser spirits or deities. Usually, fairies are portrayed as small, diminutive creatures with magical powers. But they can also be short, wizened, troll-like creatures, or tall, beautiful beings. The Spriggans of Cornwall, or the Dwergers of Northumberland, are beautiful, but sometimes hideous. The Irish Merrows have beautiful females, but ugly males. Needless to say, the physical characteristics vary widely by region. In European folklore, they are usually invisible or non-substantial spirits that live on Earth among people. In Celtic and Germanic folklore, they can appear and disappear at will and even shapeshift into an animal form. Many of their impressions from literature show them dancing in the moonlight and in streams and woodlands and are best seen at dusk. Occasionally, you will find fairies in the household, but this is less common. In Irish myth, the Tuatha Dé Danann were the children of the goddess Danu. The Tuatha were considered mighty and powerful, but in one medieval text, they are described as gods and not gods. They were godlike, but not gods. The Tuatha were very long-lived and did not live forever, and could also die from injury. It is believed that they went underground when a wave of invaders arrived due to fear of their own mortality. In hiding from these invaders, it is said that the Tuatha evolved into Ireland's fairy race, called the Sidhe. There are many modern historians that use the word Sidhe when talking about the Tuatha, preferring to lump them all into one word. The Irish Sidhe are not the small winged creatures that we think of today. They were taller than the indigenous people of Ireland, extremely pale, and had a noble presence, very similar to the Tolkien elves. The Sidhe also possessed shape-shifting powers. The Morrigan, transformed into a crow to fly across the battlefield, would be one example of this. Typically in Irish folklore, the Sidhe are associated with magical underground caverns and springs, and it is believed that if someone ventured too far into these caverns, that they would find themselves in the fairy realm. Beltane, a Gaelic pagan festival celebrated on May 1st, is said to be the time when nature comes alive and the spirits of nature, including fairies, are more active and more likely to be seen. In Scottish folklore, fairies are divided into two primary categories, the Seelie court and the Unseelie court. In English, Seelie means blessed, so those in the Seelie court were the benevolent and helpful spirits. Even though they are friendly, the fairies of the Seelie court are still dangerous if offended. The fairies of the Unseelie court are always dangerous to humans and contains creatures like the Nukkalavi, the Redcap, and the souls of the dead. It is commonly seen in fairy folklore for the fae to have lives incredibly similar to that of humans. They work and maintain families and enjoyed food, drinks, and dancing. The land of fae, sometimes called Elfland, has striking characteristics to the land of the dead. Time is altered so extremely that one day in the land of the fae could be years on Earth. The land of fae is in perpetual twilight, and in some lore, the ghosts of the dead will mingle with fairies there. A common characteristic across all folklore is their mischievous and prankish behavior. They can either be benevolent or malevolent, usually depending on how they were treated and the gifts given to them. The fae have been known to help humans if you ask them and you are deemed worthy, and even invite mortals to the land of fae. They can help with healing, your career, manifesting, and with relationships. Fairies have also been known to take human lovers and can even marry humans, though there are restrictions, and if those are broken, then it ends the marriage and possibly the life of the human. As with anything, there is a price for the help they give. If you displease the fae, you are likely to be abducted, taken away to the land of fae to become a wife if you are beautiful, or a slave if you are ugly. It is warned against to eat or drink the food in the land of fae, because doing so will cause you to be stuck in that world forever. A temporary abduction, where the person is either freed by the fairies or doesn't eat or drink, means that their earthly body will sicken but then recover. But those unfortunate to be held there forever will have their earthly bodies die. Fairies have also been known to swap out human infants with fairy infants, called changelings. The word changeling originates from medieval literature and was originally synonymous with the cambion, which was the demonic product of a human and an incubus or succubus. It wasn't until people's views on demons and fairies split that the word cambion and changeling meant different things. The lore behind changelings is quite sad, though. Medieval people often used folklore to understand the world, and the lore behind changelings is no different. In an attempt to explain children born with disease, deformity, and other developmental disabilities, medieval people thought that the human child must have been replaced by a child of myth. There are many changeling myths throughout Europe, and each has its own variation of lore. Germany had some particularly extreme measures to have your child returned. You could confuse the changeling by cooking or brewing it in eggshells. This would force the changeling to speak and reveal its age. They would also attempt to heat up the changeling in the oven to force the changeling to leave and the fae to return the human child. Hitting and whipping were also used to try to return human children. The parents of possible changelings were thought to be the devil, a belief shared by Martin Luther, a female dwarf, water sprites, and the Rye Aunt, or Rye Mother, a demonic woman who lived in cornfields and stole human children. It goes without saying, but medieval people tried to explain things they couldn't understand through myth and legend. Unfortunately, many children suffered due to the belief that these were changelings and not actual human children. Ireland, the Isle of Man, Scotland, Poland, Scandinavia, Spain, and Wales all have similar but distinct changeling tales. There were ways to prevent against your child being swapped with the fae. The main, most popular method was to baptize your infant as soon as possible. It was thought that once the infant was baptized, that they couldn't be taken by the fae. In Cornwall, the Manantall stones are said to have a fairy guardian that can provide miraculous cures. It was believed that if parents walked through the stones with a changeling, that their child would return to them. But how could someone protect themselves against the ire of the fae? Legend states that fairies have one major weakness: iron. Many medieval people made amulets of iron in order to protect themselves against the fae. Medieval people thought that several herbs were potent wards against fairies, namely St. John's wort and yarrow. Hawthorn trees, foxglove, and groundsel were said to be so precious to fairies that if you harmed these plants, you could face the wrath of the fairies. Where exactly could you find the fae? Fairies are said to be found in a variety of places. Fairy mounds, also known as fairy hills or fairy forts, are the remains of prehistoric stone circles, ring forts, hill forts, and other dwellings in Ireland. These are thought to be either the homes of fairies or other supernatural creatures, or portals to the other world. Fairy rings are naturally occurring rings of mushrooms, thought to be locations that fairies congregate. According to English and Celtic mythology, fairy rings are created by fairies and elves dancing in a circle at night. If any unfortunate human were to stumble upon these festivities and enter the ring, they would be forced to dance until they pass out from exhaustion, are driven insane, or die. In modern media, fairies have been incredibly popular. From Disney movies like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Peter Pan, to books such as Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream and the Artemis Fowl series, fairies have absolutely captivated people for centuries. The folklore surrounding fairies still has deep roots even in today's time. Many children believe in the tooth fairy. People still leave gifts out to appease the fae, and the superstition about walking through fairy rings persists to this day. So, what do you think? Are the fae real and just hiding in plain sight, or was it a myth made to try to explain unknown phenomena in a time before modern science? Let me know down below. As always, thank you for watching this episode of A Mythic History. If you have any suggestions for what my next episode should cover, let me know down below. It can be about any creature from folklore, fairy tales, myths, or legends. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me with the YouTube algorithm. If you want to be notified as soon as I post a new video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to turn notifications on. I post new videos every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the occasional surprise video. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and stay well, friends, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, loves.